Welcome back, everyone. We're going to start on Unit 3, Advanced Fishing. This is a outline of Unit 3. We'll go through the normal fish, then we'll talk about tackle, technique, finding fish, and we'll wrap it up with safety. Since part of this unit was supposed to be at Dunn Meadow, we'll have to make some accommodations, some video demonstrations, hopefully that will cover the things that we would have missed at Dunn Meadow. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into fish anatomy. Fish are nearsighted. They don't see all that well. And if you look at the diagram right here, you can see that they only have binocular vision in about 30 degrees right up here directly in front of them. Otherwise, on both sides, they have monocular vision. Now, that vision is quite wide. Overall, they have 330 degrees of vision, so they're rather difficult to sneak up on. They don't see directly behind them, so that is their blind side. Their monocular vision on the sides is not terribly acute. They're going to pick up on shapes, shadows, and movement. They also have a little bonus going for them due to refraction. If a fish is in the water at this depth, they get about a 10-degree boost out of refraction from looking up under the water through the surface. And if you're over here fishing, yeah, they definitely have spotted you long before you have spotted them. So this kind of plays into the concept we talked about earlier, where fishing is a bit of a misnomer. It technically should be called fish hunting, where you can practice stealthy techniques. Hunters wear camouflage clothing. Maybe fishermen should wear camouflage clothing. I actually made fun of this years ago, just kind of spouted off about how there's going to be an entire line of fish camo and how you can blend in with the natural environment and so on and so forth. And yeah, marketers did come up with fish camo. It's particularly prevalent in saltwater, flats fishing down in Florida, the Keys, that area. We don't see it so much in inland warm water fishing, but yeah, it's out there. Fish see only really primary colors and grays and shades of grays. Whenever you go into the sporting goods store and buy the lures, the color of the lure that you see is not necessarily the color that the fish is going to see. A lot of lures are colored to match natural prey. Others are colored to be simply an attractor. If you can piss the fish off enough, it's going to attack. If you're fishing very, very deep, the color that you see is definitely not the color the fish sees, because the deeper you go into the water column, the more the colors change. By the time you hit 100 feet, everything is basically kind of a bluish gray. Let's talk about some different species that we have in Indiana. One of the biggest species we have as far as physical size is the pikes. These are warm water fish. These are most definitely predators, and they prefer cooler waters. Remember, they're warm water fish, but they prefer cooler waters. The first one would be the great northern pike. If you've ever had the pleasure of catching one of these things, you know that it is quite a thrill. We find northern pike primarily in northern Indiana, especially the natural lakes up there, and also the Tippecanoe River. I have never fished for pike in Indiana. I have caught them elsewhere. They are a thrill. Ideal water temperature, 60 to 70 degrees. World record, 55 pounds, set in Germany. Pike fishing is really, really big in Europe. Its big brother, the musky lunch, is called the fish of 10,000 cast. You don't catch these things like you do bluegill. You know, if I don't get a bluegill every 2 or 3 casts, this isn't a very good spot, and I'll probably move. These guys, you can literally spend 3 days and not catch a single thing, and then the 4th day, hook into one. They're fabulous fish, very, very large. 69 pounds, 70 pounds in Germany. We're talking 36, 48 inches, even longer in length. There's quite a movement afoot in the U.S. to preserve these fish. They do grow to be quite old, and usually you would find the really big ones on doctors' and lawyers' walls, hanging as a mount. There's been a push to practice catch and release with these species more, and in fact there's an entire system developed with special catch and release nets that you bring the fish alongside your boat. You put them in this very elongated net, keep them in the water, remove the hook, grab a couple photos, and release them. These are fish that will fight to absolute exhaustion. And if they're too exhausted, they literally will die from fighting. And so the idea is to land them quickly, purposefully, and release them unharmed. You'll see the grip and grin photos of the guy standing there with his pike. He's got his hands up and under the gill plates, and the fish is vertical right beside them. Absolutely the most harmful way that you can handle one of these fish. These fish are horizontal. They're not designed to go vertical. And when you put them vertical, the weight of all those organs internally just crushes things, and many of them don't survive the catch and the release. So there's an entire protocol that has been developed. In fact, I have some videos in Unit 3 that talks about handling muskie. Big fish, big lures. You can catch them on spin tackle. This is where the bait casting reels most definitely come in. Also fly fishing. You can tie various types of flies for muskie, and I've heard that it's an absolute hoot to get a muskie on a fly rod. Near Bloomington, we have some strip pits over in near Columbus, near Edinburgh, that have stocked muskies. So that might be in your future. Okay, let's talk about salmonids. Probably one of my favorite fish. These are both saltwater and freshwater species. We'll concentrate on the freshwater aspects of these. Cold water fish. Yay, we finally get to cold water fish after me berating you the entire semester about the difference between warm water and cold water. Okay, here we go. Cold water. Most definitely predators. Some unique things about them. Unlike the other fish, they cannot tolerate water temperatures above about 72 degrees. We've talked about this at length. They require very rich oxygen levels. They do not do well in low O2 waters. And they have that anapose fin right up here. When we were discussing catfish, we talked about the anapose fin, and we talked about the purpose of the anapose fin. We don't know the purpose of the anapose fin. It's there. Sometimes you will catch, this is a rainbow trout, sometimes you will catch a rainbow trout and they will not have an anapose fin. That's not a mutation, that's probably a tagged fish. Sometimes whenever they do a stocking program, the biologist will clip off the anapose fin as a marker, and so that whenever they do surveys and they find these fish, they can tell the stocked fish from perhaps wild hatched fish. The wild hatched fish are going to have the anapose fin, where the stocked fish will not. This is rainbow trout. I would like to see a show of hands of those who agree that this is the best tasting fish in the world. Yeah, I agree there too. Ideal water temperature, 55 to 70 degrees. Above 72, 74 degrees, they really get stressed. Nearby, we have the Brookville Reservoir in eastern Indiana, and the Brookville River that drains the tailwater of the reservoir is stocked with rainbow trout, and I believe also brown trout. 2 years ago, there was a bulletin put out by the DNR that asked people not to fish for trout in the Brookville River because of high water temperatures. The water temperatures were about 71, 72, some places up to 74 degrees, and they asked fishermen, just don't, please stop fishing. The fish still need to eat, and if you offer them something that they hook up on, they're going to get stressed through the catch and subsequent release process, and mortality rates really increase the higher the water temperature is. And so most fishermen either caught fish to consume themselves, or they just didn't fish to avoid the stress on the fish. Not terribly big fish. 8 inches is the average size. You can go out and get half a dozen of these and have just an absolute fine meal. This is what my uncle up in western Pennsylvania, the Allegheny Mountains, and I used to go after quite often. He was a fabulous trout fisherman. Favorite food, minnows, crayfish, insects. Very heavy on the insects. They actually behave very much like bluegill. They're not going to go chase a 4-inch bluegill or shad, like a largemouth bass will. They go for the smaller insect, the smaller forage food, particularly insects. Fly fishermen will get into just all kinds of elaborate fly tying patterns to mimic naturals in the environment, and just a fabulous all-around fish. Very beautiful. Its big brother, the Chinook salmon, is... Yeah, we have salmon in Indiana. Who would have thunk that? This is a long conversation whenever it boils down to fishery management. We had an awful problem in the Great Lakes years ago, back in the 50s and 60s. We had an invader called a sea lamprey, and also the alewife minnow. These got into the Great Lakes and they totally disrupted the sport fishing species, particularly the lake trout up in Lake Michigan, Superior, all of the Great Lakes. The sea lamprey would hook on. Well, we're going to talk more about this in the invasive species. So let's just say that there was a huge problem with these guys, and they decided that they had to introduce a new predator species into the Great Lakes, just very similar to the way they introduced the hybrid striped bass into Lake Monroe. So they introduced salmon. Very, very unique. They took some species of salmon from the Pacific coast, and some species from the Atlantic coast, and they put them in very specific spots throughout the Great Lakes. And so you have these different strains of Chinook salmon in between Lake Superior and Lake Erie. And if you're a real die-hard, dedicated salmon fisherman of the Great Lakes, you literally can be fishing a spawn pretty much year-round, because these different strains of fish spawn at different times. We have a strain that spawn in January and February in Indiana, up near St. Joe River, in through there. We don't have very much of a coastline in the Great Lakes, but we do have some. Indiana Dunes is absolutely gorgeous. If you haven't been up there, I highly recommend it. My wife and I were there this past summer and thoroughly enjoyed it.